Wolves attack a helpless bear cub, you won't believe who saved it. The ancient forest stood silent under the shroud of night, its towering trees stretching endlessly toward the sky, their branches swaying with an eerie whisper. The wind carried the scent of damp earth, its cold bite settling into the thick undergrowth. Somewhere deep within this vast wilderness, a tiny bear cub named Scout trembled, his small form huddled beneath a fallen log. The mudslide had come suddenly, roaring through the valley with merciless force, sweeping away trees, stones, and lives alike. One moment, he had been padding beside his mother, Willow, her familiar scent filling his world with warmth and safety, and the next, the ground beneath him had vanished. He had tumbled, helpless and weightless, into the chaos, his cries drowned by the deafening roar of sliding earth. Now he was alone, surrounded by darkness so thick it felt alive, pressing against his fragile body like unseen claws. His small chest heaved with panicked breaths, his ears straining for any sign of his mother. But the forest had turned against him, every rustling leaf, every distant snap of a branch filled his mind with terror. Then the sound came, a low growl, deep and guttural, reverberating through the stillness. Scout froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. Slowly, he turned his wide, frightened eyes toward the undergrowth, where shadows shifted unnaturally, slithering closer. The moon, pale and distant above the canopy, cast its dim glow upon the clearing, revealing them, wolves. A pack of them emerged from the darkness, their lean forms moving with deadly grace, silver eyes glinting with hunger. Their leader, a towering black wolf with a jagged scar running down his muzzle, stepped forward, his head low, his yellow teeth gleaming. Shadow. Scout knew of the wolves. His mother had warned him of them. They were the silent hunters of the night, relentless, merciless. He whimpered, his tiny claws scraping against the damp earth as he backed further beneath the log, but there was nowhere to go. The pack fanned out, their movements practiced, their formation flawless, a predator's dance, an unbreakable rhythm designed to corner, to trap. Shadow let out a low, rumbling growl, signaling the kill. The others tensed, muscles coiling like drawn bows. Scout's breath hitched, his body trembling violently. He was too small, too weak. He could not fight. He could not run. Desperation surged through him, primal and wild, and he did the only thing left to do, he cried out. The sound was raw, piercing, echoing through the forest with a helplessness that made even the wolves hesitate. It was the call of something fragile, something meant to be protected, not destroyed. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the ground trembled. A low, thunderous growl rolled through the clearing, deeper than anything the wolves had ever heard, a sound that carried with it the weight of storms, the fury of mountains. The shadows behind the wolves shifted, not with the wind but with something far more powerful. The pack turned, their predatory confidence faltering as a massive shape emerged from the darkness, towering above them. His thick fur was matted with old scars, his amber eyes burning with unspoken wrath. Thunder. The grizzly was a legend, whispered among the creatures of the forest, a force of nature whose presence alone could silence the bravest of beasts. He had fought battles that left the trees broken and the rivers stained red. He had walked alone for seasons uncounted, a phantom in the wilds, untamed, undefeated. And now, he stood between Scout and the wolves, an unmovable wall of fury and strength. Thunder's breath was slow, steady, but his eyes never wavered from Shadow, who met his gaze with a snarl of defiance. The tension crackled like a brewing storm, thick and suffocating. Shadow stepped forward, his hackles raised, his ears flat against his skull. He was no coward. He had led his pack through countless hunts, had taken down prey far larger than this bear. He would not back down. With a snarl, he lunged. The world exploded. Thunder moved with terrifying speed for something so large, his claws slashing through the air like blades. The first wolf barely had time to yelp before he was sent sprawling, the force of the blow sending him tumbling into the undergrowth. The others followed, their coordinated attack breaking into chaos as thunder met them head-on, a whirlwind of untamed fury. Shadow leaped for his throat, his fangs aiming for the soft flesh beneath the thick fur, but Thunder twisted at the last moment, his massive paw catching the wolf midair and slamming him into the earth with bone-crushing force. A yelp, then silence. For a moment, Scout could only watch, his fear replaced with awe. Thunder stood over Shadow's battered form, his breath coming in ragged, steaming bursts, his fur streaked with fresh wounds. The remaining wolves hesitated, their resolve wavering. Then, as if by unspoken command, they retreated, disappearing into the darkness, leaving their leader behind. Thunder did not chase them. He remained still, his chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes locked onto the defeated Alpha at his feet. Shadow growled weakly, attempting to rise, but his legs betrayed him. Thunder stepped back, his silent warning clear: if the wolf tried again, he would not be granted mercy. Shadow, chest heaving, finally relented, his ears flattening in submission. With one last lingering glare, he turned and limped into the forest, vanishing between the trees. Thunder exhaled, his massive frame relaxing, though his eyes remained sharp. Slowly, he turned to Scout, who was still curled beneath the log, his tiny body pressed tightly against the damp earth. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Thunder huffed, stepping forward and nudging the cub with his snout. Scout flinched at first, but there was no aggression in the touch, only something deep and unspoken. An acknowledgement. A promise. Then another sound broke through the quiet. A roar, fierce and familiar. Willow. Scout's heart leaped as his mother burst into the clearing, her golden-brown fur bristling, her eyes wild with panic. She took in the scene, the shredded ground, the scent of wolves, the towering grizzly beside her cub. Her body tensed, instinct demanding she defend her son. But then she saw the way Scout looked at Thunder. The way Thunder did not challenge her, did not move to claim what was not his. The moment stretched between them, heavy with understanding. Then Willow stepped forward, wrapping her massive frame around her cub, nuzzling him, reassuring him that she was here, that he was safe. Scout buried his face in her fur, inhaling the scent of home. But when he lifted his head, his gaze still sought Thunder. The grizzly was already turning, his duty done, his path leading him back to the solitude that had defined him for so long. Yet as he took his first step away, something gave him pause. He glanced back. Willow was watching him, her expression unreadable, but there was no hostility in her eyes. Only a question. Scout, still pressed against his mother, let out a small sound, not of fear, but of something else. Something new. Thunder stood still for a moment longer, the weight of seasons past pressing against him. Then, silently, he turned back, his massive form settling near the clearing's edge. He would not leave. Not yet. And the forest, watching, whispered of something beginning, something that had never been before. The lone warrior had found something worth staying for. The morning sun crept through the dense canopy of the ancient forest. Its golden fingers cast a soft glow upon the dark ground. The storm had passed, but the echoes of the night's battle lingered like a whisper in the crisp air. Scout pressed against his mother's warm side, his small frame still trembling from the events that had unfolded hours before. His world had changed in ways he did not yet understand. The wolves, once distant figures of fear, had nearly taken his life. The grizzly, Thunder, a legend whispered in the rustling leaves, had emerged from the darkness and stood between him and death itself. And now, he did not leave. He lingered, a silent guardian just beyond the clearing's edge, his massive form blending into the shadows of the towering pines. Willow, ever watchful, eyed him warily. She did not trust easily. Instinct told her to take Scout and move on, to find a safer place where they would not be at the mercy of another predator. But something in the way Thunder carried himself, the way he had fought not for dominance, not for gain, but simply to protect, made her hesitate. Grizzlies did not forge bonds with strangers. They lived alone, fought alone, and died alone. Yet this one had chosen to stay. Scout, his tiny legs still wobbly from exhaustion, lifted his gaze to Thunder with something new in his wide brown eyes, not fear, not weariness, but something softer. Wonder. Thunder met the cub's gaze for a long moment before exhaling heavily, his broad chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. He was not here to claim, not here to take. He was simply here. The morning stretched into the afternoon, and still, Thunder remained. He did not intrude, did not attempt to close the distance between them, but neither did he leave. Scout, young and curious despite the weight of his ordeal, found himself stealing glances at the great bear more than he realized. He had never seen one like him before. His mother was strong, her presence a force of nature, but Thunder was something else. There was a stillness about him, an air of solitude that had nothing to do with weakness. It was as though he had walked this land long before Scout had even been born, carrying the weight of seasons upon his scarred hide. And yet, he had chosen to answer Scout's call. Why? The question nestled itself deep in the cub's heart, refusing to be ignored. With the reckless bravery of youth, Scout took a step forward. Willow noticed instantly, her muscles tensing, a low warning rumble humming in her throat. But she did not stop him. Not yet. Thunder merely watched as the cub approached, his amber eyes unreadable. Scout hesitated just a few paces away, glancing back at his mother, seeking reassurance before turning back to the giant before him. His nose twitched, catching Thunder's scent, wild, laced with something ancient, something untamed. He sniffed again, inching closer, his tiny paws pressing into the soft soil. Thunder remained motionless, allowing the cub to close the distance at his own pace. Finally, Scout reached out with a tentative paw, barely brushing against the grizzly's thick fur before jerking back as if expecting Thunder to snap at him. But Thunder did not move. He simply blinked, exhaling another deep breath, his sheer presence steady and unshaken. Scout tilted his head, curious. He had expected a reaction, expected something, but Thunder gave nothing beyond his unwavering silence. The cub tried again, this time pressing his paw more firmly against Thunder's leg, testing, exploring. Still nothing. Scout, emboldened, let out a small, playful huff, a sound meant to entice some sort of response. Thunder twitched slightly, but otherwise, he remained the immovable mountain that he was. Willow, still watching from a distance, shifted her weight, uncertain. Her cub had never interacted with another bear beyond herself, had never reached out to something so unknown with such trust. The world had always been her and Scout, an unbroken bond between mother and child. But now there was this stranger, this warrior who had stepped from the void of the night and, without words, without demand, had become something neither of them had expected. Family? No, not yet. But something close. The days passed in slow, quiet harmony, and Thunder did not leave. He moved when they moved, rested when they rested, always a few paces behind, never imposing, but never too far. Scout, in his youthful curiosity, grew bolder, his initial hesitance melting into familiarity. He began mimicking the older bear's movements, watching the way he walked, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to listen to the forest in ways Scout had yet to learn. Thunder, for his part, did not acknowledge the cub's antics directly, but something in his demeanor shifted ever so slightly, a softness, perhaps, a quiet acceptance. It was on the fourth day that Thunder finally acted. They had stopped by a river, the waters rushing over smooth stones, glistening under the midday sun. Willow had waded into the shallows, her powerful limbs cutting through the current with ease as she searched for fish. Scout, eager to imitate her, bounded forward, his enthusiasm outpacing his coordination. His paws slipped against the wet rocks, and in an instant he was tumbling forward, the river seizing him in its relentless grip. A yelp, sharp and frightened, echoed through the air. Before Willow could react, before Scout could even comprehend what had happened, Thunder moved. The grizzly was upon the riverbank in a single bound, his massive frame plunging into the churning waters with the grace of something far too practiced at survival. The current was strong, stronger than a cub could ever hope to fight. But Thunder was stronger still. With one great swipe of his paw, he caught Scout's small body against his own, anchoring him against the pull of the river. The cub coughed, spluttering, eyes wide with shock as Thunder hauled him effortlessly from the water, placing him onto solid ground with the gentleness of something so much greater than mere instinct. Willow arrived a heartbeat later, her breath heavy, her gaze flicking between Scout and Thunder. A silent war of emotions raging behind her eyes, fear, relief, gratitude. Scout, still drenched, shook himself off, blinking up at Thunder with something close to awe. He had not hesitated. He had acted without question, without thought of himself. The cub had known his mother would protect him, had always believed that nothing could stand against her. But now, there was another, someone else who had stepped into the storm without hesitation. A guardian. A teacher. A legend. That night, as they settled beneath the stars, Scout curled close to his mother, his small body still shivering from the near drowning. Yet his eyes found Thunder's silhouette resting just beyond the clearing, the grizzly's breath slow, steady, unwavering. For the first time in his young life, Scout understood something deeper than hunger, deeper than fear. He understood what it meant to be protected, what it meant to belong. And as the night stretched on, as the forest whispered secrets through the wind, a bond was forged, not of blood, not of nature's design, but of something far greater. Something unbreakable. The sun hung low over the forest, its golden light slipping between the trees, casting long shadows that stretched across the earth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, carrying the distant call of birds settling in for the evening. Scout sat at the edge of a clearing, his small form still, his ears twitching as he listened to the rhythmic sounds of the wild. Behind him, his mother, Willow, watched with careful eyes, her massive frame blending seamlessly with the towering trees. And just beyond them, standing like a silent guardian, was Thunder. He had not left. Day after day, he lingered, just far enough to remain apart, but close enough to be present. His amber eyes carried a weight Scout did not yet understand, a depth that whispered of battles fought and paths walked alone. The cub found himself drawn to the old bear, watching him with growing fascination. Thunder moved differently than Willow. He was slower, not from weakness but from something deeper, something measured, deliberate. He did not waste energy on unnecessary movement, nor did he respond to every noise, every rustling leaf, the way Scout did. There was wisdom in his stillness, a quiet strength that demanded no proof. Scout wanted to understand it. He wanted to learn. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Scout stirred from his sleep to find Thunder already awake. The great bear stood at the edge of the trees, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. Willow still slept, her breath slow and steady, the rise and fall of her chest undisturbed. Scout hesitated, then, with quiet steps, padded toward Thunder. The older bear did not acknowledge him at first, did not shift or turn, as though he had expected the cub's approach all along. Scout sat beside him, mirroring his posture, his small body tense with anticipation. He wanted Thunder to speak, to tell him something, to acknowledge the silent questions swirling inside him. But Thunder remained as he was, silent, unmoving. Scout frowned, shifting impatiently. He wanted to understand the world the way Thunder did. He wanted to be strong, not just in the way his mother was, but in the way that Thunder seemed to be. Unshakable. But how? He huffed softly, frustration bubbling in his chest. Thunder finally turned his head, his gaze falling upon the cub, unreadable, vast. Then, without a word, he started walking. Scout blinked in surprise before scrambling to his paws, his heart pounding as he hurried after him. They moved through the trees, weaving through the underbrush, the scent of damp leaves and rich soil thick in the morning air. Thunder did not rush, did not turn to see if Scout followed. He simply walked. Scout stumbled once, twice, but forced himself to keep pace. He did not know where they were going, but he did not want to be left behind. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a fallen tree stretched across a shallow stream. Thunder stopped at the edge, his massive frame still as he surveyed the water. Scout came up beside him, panting slightly, his legs already tired from the journey. He followed Thunder's gaze to the water and saw what had caught the old bear's attention, fish gliding beneath the surface, their silver bodies flashing in the dim light. Scout's stomach rumbled. He had tried fishing before, had watched his mother do it many times, but he had never been very good. He would lunge too early or too late, and the fish would always escape. Thunder stepped forward, his large paws barely making a sound as he climbed onto the fallen log. He moved with a careful grace, his balance effortless, his presence commanding. Scout watched in awe as Thunder stood over the water, his head lowering ever so slightly, his eyes locked onto the shifting currents below. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, in a flash, Thunder struck. His paw sliced through the water with a force that sent droplets flying in every direction. When he lifted it again, a fish wriggled between his claws, its scales catching the morning light. With a quick motion, Thunder tossed it onto the bank, where it flopped against the earth, its movements frantic and desperate. Thunder stepped off the log, landing with a solid thud, and turned to Scout. He said nothing, but his gaze spoke volumes. "Now you try." Scout swallowed, his nerves prickling. He clambered onto the log, his small claws digging into the rough bark, his heart hammering against his ribs. The water looked deeper from up here. The fish, faster, slipperier. He glanced back at Thunder, who remained still, waiting. The cub took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He watched the water, watched the way the fish moved, tried to predict their rhythm. Then, summoning every ounce of courage he had, he struck. His paw hit the surface with a loud splash, water exploding in every direction. But when he lifted it again, there was nothing. The fish had escaped. Scout's ears flattened against his head, frustration burning in his chest. He heard Thunder's heavy exhale behind him, not disappointment, not frustration. Just patience. Again. Scout gritted his teeth and tried once more. And again. And again. Each time, he missed. Each time, the fish darted away, untouched. Victorious. His muscles ached, his fur dripped with water, but he refused to stop. He did not want to fail, not in front of Thunder, not in front of himself. The old bear said nothing, did nothing. Only waited. The sun climbed higher, the air grew warmer, but still they remained. And then, finally, on what felt like his 100th attempt, Scout's paw connected. He felt the fish's slippery body against his claws, felt the weight of it as he lifted it, flinging it onto the bank. His breath came fast and shallow as he stared at his catch, his heart soaring with triumph. He had done it. Thunder stepped forward, his shadow falling over Scout as he reached down, nudging the fish with his snout before meeting the cub's gaze. A silent acknowledgement, not praise, not pride, but something deeper. Understanding. Scout puffed out his chest slightly, the exhaustion in his limbs momentarily forgotten. He had learned something today. Not just how to fish, but something more important, something that Thunder had not spoken aloud, yet had taught him with every patient breath. Strength was not in brute force, nor was it in speed or size. Strength was in patience. In learning. In failing, over and over, and never allowing failure to be the end. They returned to Willow that afternoon, Scout carrying his fish with great care, his steps lighter, his heart steadier. Willow eyed Thunder as they approached, her expression unreadable. But she said nothing. She only watched as Scout placed the fish before her, a silent offering. Proof of what he had done. She leaned down, touching her nose to his forehead, a rare moment of quiet approval. Scout beamed. That night, as he curled against his mother, his body sore but his spirit full, he looked toward the darkness where Thunder rested. The old bear did not speak, did not move, but Scout knew he was there, knew that when morning came, he would rise again, and perhaps, just perhaps, Thunder would lead him once more. The forest had changed. It was subtle at first, a whisper in the wind, a shift in the scents carried through the trees, but it was there. The days had grown shorter, the golden warmth of summer fading into the crisp coolness of autumn. The leaves, once lush and green, now burned in shades of amber and crimson, drifting lazily from the branches to blanket the earth in their silent descent. Scout noticed everything. He had always been curious, but now, after spending so much time with Thunder, he saw the world differently. He watched the way the birds moved, how they gathered in greater numbers, their wings beating the sky as they prepared for journeys unknown. He noticed how the air smelled different, how the river ran colder, sharper, cutting through the land with newfound urgency. The world was preparing for something. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew it was important. Thunder had not left. He was a permanent presence now, lingering just beyond the edges of where Willow and Scout roamed, never intruding, but never far. Willow still did not fully trust him. It was not in her nature to trust easily, especially not a grizzly as large and battle-worn as Thunder. But she did not send him away either, and that, Scout knew, meant something. The cub had grown stronger in the past few weeks. He could feel it in his legs when he ran, in his paws when he climbed over fallen logs, in his shoulders when he mimicked Thunder's movements. His balance was better, his reactions quicker. He had learned patience, how to wait, how to listen. But there was still so much he did not know. It was a cool morning when Thunder finally led him somewhere new. The sky was pale, the sun struggling to rise beyond the treetops, its light casting long shadows over the ground. Willow had gone to search for food, leaving Scout near their den. But he had not wanted to wait. He had watched Thunder disappear into the trees, and without hesitation, he had followed. He no longer needed an invitation. He knew now that Thunder would not stop him. The old bear knew Scout would follow, and so he did. They moved in silence, their footsteps barely disturbing the earth beneath them. The forest seemed different here, the trees taller, their trunks stretching toward the heavens, their roots twisting over rocks like ancient fingers gripping the past. Scout had never been this far before. The land felt untouched, sacred in a way he could not explain. Thunder led him to a ridge where the ground sloped downward into a valley shrouded in mist. From here, Scout could see everything, the endless stretch of trees, the winding river carving its path through the land, the distant mountains standing tall against the sky. It was beautiful. It was vast. Thunder stopped at the edge of the ridge, his amber eyes scanning the land below with something unreadable, something heavy. Scout sat beside him, his own gaze following Thunder's, trying to understand what the old bear saw. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Thunder shifted. He turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at Scout, and then he made a sound, a low, rumbling growl. Not of warning. Not of anger. But of something else. It took Scout a moment to realize what it was. It was a lesson. The cub frowned, tilting his head, trying to decipher the meaning in that deep, ancient voice. Then Thunder lifted his nose to the wind, inhaling deeply. Scout followed his lead, breathing in the scents of the valley, the damp earth, the crisp air. And then he smelled it. Something different. Something wrong. The scent was faint, but it was there, buried beneath the usual smells of the forest. A scent Scout had never encountered before. It was sharp, bitter, unnatural. He glanced at Thunder, but the old bear did not explain. He only waited. Scout sniffed again, trying to understand, trying to make sense of the strange, acrid stench that clung to the air like a warning. And then he heard it. Distant, but growing closer. The sound of movement. Heavy and deliberate, unlike anything in the forest. A snapping twig. A rustling bush. Then, voices. Scout froze, his ears flicking forward. He had never heard voices like these. They were deep, strange, nothing like the howls of wolves or the grunts of other bears. They were layered with something else, something Scout could not name but instinctively knew was dangerous. He pressed himself lower to the ground, his small body tense with uncertainty. Thunder remained still, watching, listening. The voices grew louder. And then, through the mist, they appeared. They walked on two legs, their figures tall and looming, covered in strange furs that did not belong to them. Their movements were unlike anything Scout had ever seen, calculated, unnatural. And in their hands, they carried something. Gleaming. Long. Cold. Sharp. Scout did not understand. But Thunder did. The old bear let out a low rumble, barely audible, but enough to tell Scout one thing. Stay down. Do not move. The figures did not see them. They walked through the valley, their strange objects slung over their shoulders, their voices murmuring in a language Scout did not recognize. They left behind footprints that did not belong in the forest. Scents that did not mix with the wild. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, swallowed by the trees beyond the mist. Scout let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He turned to Thunder, his heart still hammering. The old bear said nothing. He only looked at the valley. At the tracks left behind. At the place where the strange figures had disappeared. Then, he turned and began walking back toward the trees. Scout hesitated, glancing once more at the valley, then hurried after him. He had learned to follow without question. But this time, his mind was restless, full of questions he did not know how to ask. Thunder led him back through the forest, moving quicker than before, his steps more determined. When they reached the place where Willow had left him, the great bear finally stopped. He turned to Scout, his amber eyes locking onto the cubs with a seriousness Scout had never seen before. For the first time, Thunder made a sound that was more than a growl, more than a grunt. It was something deeper, something closer to words, though not spoken in a way Scout understood. It was a command, a warning, something was coming, something that did not belong in the forest, something that threatened everything. Scout did not fully understand, but he nodded, his chest tightening with something new, fear, but also something else, determination. That night, as he lay curled beside Willow, his mind raced with images of what he had seen, of the figures that walked like no creature he had ever known, of the sharp scent they left behind, of the cold gleam of the objects they carried. He felt, for the first time, the weight of something greater than himself. The world was larger than he had ever imagined, and danger was closer than he had ever realized. Thunder had led him to the ridge for a reason. He had shown him the valley for a reason. And Scout knew, deep in his heart, that the lesson was far from over. The night was heavy with silence, not the peaceful kind that wrapped the forest in a soft embrace, but the kind that pressed against the earth, thick with tension, waiting to be broken. The trees stood still, their branches unmoving despite the occasional whisper of wind. The moon hung high, casting its pale glow over the land, illuminating the valley where Scout had seen them. The creatures that walked on two legs, the ones that carried the sharp, gleaming objects that did not belong to the forest. He could not sleep. His mind spun, replaying the sight over and over, the way they moved, the strange sounds they made, the scent they left behind, bitter and cold. Something deep in his chest told him that they were dangerous, that they were a threat unlike anything he had ever faced before. He turned his head toward Thunder, who lay nearby, his massive frame stretched across the earth, his breath slow but not deep enough to be sleep. He was awake, watching, waiting. Scout swallowed hard, his small body shivering despite the warmth of his mother's presence beside him. Willow had returned late, unaware of what he had seen, of what Thunder had shown him. She had sensed his unease but had not pressed him, trusting that if there was something she needed to know, she would know it in time. But now, in the dead of night, with only the shadows for company, Scout felt a restlessness growing inside him, a pull he did not understand. Without thinking, he rose to his paws, his movements slow and careful so as not to wake his mother. He stepped lightly over the cool earth, his ears perked, his senses sharp. He did not know where he was going, only that he needed to go. Thunder's head lifted before Scout even took his second step, the old bear's amber eyes gleaming in the moonlight, sharp and knowing, as if he had expected this. He did not move, did not stop Scout, only watched as the cub hesitated, his tiny paws pressing into the dirt, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then, after a long, silent moment, Thunder stood. His movement was slow, deliberate, and without a sound. He turned toward the valley. Scout understood. He followed. They moved through the trees, their path carved in shadows and moonlight, weaving between the thick trunks and over fallen branches. The forest, once a place of comfort, now felt different. Scout's ears twitched at every sound, every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a twig. His heartbeat quickened, his breath coming in shallow puffs, but he did not stop. Thunder led, and he followed. The valley came into view sooner than Scout expected, stretching out before them like a great wound in the land. The mist had returned, curling around the trees, swirling in lazy tendrils above the grass. The world felt fragile here, as if it was holding its breath. Thunder stopped at the ridge, his nose lifting to the air, scenting the wind. Scout did the same, inhaling deeply. At first, there was nothing, just earth and trees and the faint scent of damp leaves. But then it came, that same sharp, acrid stench. Scout stiffened, his fur bristling. He turned toward Thunder, waiting, searching for a sign, a command. But Thunder did not speak. Instead, he moved forward, stepping onto the slope that led down into the valley. Scout hesitated only a moment before following, his tiny paws careful on the uneven ground. They crept through the mist, their bodies blending with the shifting silver, their steps silent. The scent grew stronger, and with it, so did Scout's unease. Then, through the haze, he saw them. The figures were back. There were more of them this time, their strange coverings blending into the darkness, their voices low, murmuring to one another in sounds Scout could not decipher. They moved differently now, slower, more careful, as if searching for something. And then he saw what they had left behind. The ground near their feet was disturbed, the earth torn up, scattered in unnatural ways. And the scent was not just theirs. There was something else, something familiar. Blood. Scout's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounded so hard he was afraid they would hear it. He turned to Thunder, his chest tightening, fear gripping his small body like a vice. But Thunder remained still, watching, waiting. His expression was unreadable, but his body spoke volumes, his muscles were taut beneath his thick fur, his stance heavy, prepared. Then, slowly, he began to move. He stepped forward, his massive frame cutting through the mist like a shadow made flesh. He did not charge, did not roar, did not make a sound. He simply walked, his presence alone shifting the air, pressing against the figures who did not belong. The two-legged creatures noticed him. Delayed. One of them turned, his strange object raised, and for the first time, Scout saw it clearly. It was long like a branch, but not wood, and the end of it gleamed like the edge of a claw, a weapon. Thunder did not slow. The figure made a noise, loud and sharp, and in the next second, a deafening crack split the night. Scout flinched, his ears ringing, his body jerking back in terror. He did not understand what had happened, but the scent of fire filled the air, smoke curling from the end of the object the creature held. Thunder did not stop. He was upon them before the figure could react, his massive paw striking with the force of a falling tree. The figure flew backward, crashing into the earth with a cry that was quickly swallowed by silence. The others shouted, scrambling, their voices frantic, their movements clumsy. Another crack split the air, but Thunder was already moving, weaving between them like a ghost, a force beyond their comprehension. Scout could only watch, frozen, as the old bear tore through them with the precision of something far more than instinct. These creatures did not belong here, and Thunder, the guardian of the wild, was making sure they understood that. One by one, they fell, their cries fading into the night, their presence erased as quickly as it had come. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Thunder stood in the center of the valley, his breath heavy, his fur streaked with blood that was not his own. The mist swirled around him, the forest watching, silent, bearing witness to the battle that had just taken place. The figures were gone, their strange sense fading, their footprints the only evidence they had ever been here at all. Scout trembled, his legs weak, his mind spinning. He did not understand all of it, but he understood one thing: the forest was safe. Thunder turned, his amber eyes locking onto Scout's, and for the first time, there was something there, something Scout had never seen before. Not just power, not just strength, but finality, a lesson completed, a duty fulfilled. The old bear stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and with a slow, deliberate movement, he lowered his head and touched his nose to Scout's forehead. A blessing. A farewell. Scout's chest ached, though he did not know why. He blinked up at Thunder, confusion flickering in his eyes, but the old bear said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, his massive frame disappearing into the mist, fading into the trees like a shadow returning to the earth. Scout did not call after him. He did not need to. He understood now. Thunder had always walked alone. And now, it was Scout's turn to find his own path. The forest breathed again, and the wind carried the whispers of a legend that would never be forgotten.